Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this informational webinar as we prepare for the start of the 2022-23 school year. We know this time of year can be exciting and you may be a little nervous as well, but we hope that this session will provide you with some information to help you prepare for the school year. I'm Dr. Admin Alexander, the Director of the Office of Family and Community Engagement, and I'm here with several panelists that will be sharing information as we get ready for the school year. Let's meet our panelists. First, our superintendent, Dr. Aaron Spence. Next, Dr. Caitlin Podati, Director of the Virginia Beach Department of Public Health. Mr. Matt Delaney, Chief Schools Officer. Dr. James Smith, Senior Executive Director of Middle Schools. Dr. Walter Brower, Jr., Senior Executive Director of High Schools. Dr. Don Robertson, Chief of Staff. Mr. Jack Freeman, Chief Operations Officer. Ms. Vika Harrison, Director of Food Services and Distribution. Dr. Kip Rogers, Chief Academic Officer. Ms. Natalie Allen, Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer. Behind the scenes, Mr. David Din, Chief Information Officer. Mr. Tommy DiMartini, Director of Security and Emergency Management. Mr. James Lash, Executive Director of Transportation and Fleet Management Services. I would also like to introduce our ASL interpreters, Kim Fox and Ms. Stacy Lowe. Thank you all for being here. Dr. Spence, I'm going to begin the session by turning it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander, and welcome. It's great to see so many folks joining us this evening from our secondary schools. If you're like me and you're a parent, you're just really excited about this school year getting ready to start. I can tell you, having spent some time out here in our schools this week and last with our teachers as they've been coming back and our new teachers who are coming on board, there is a lot of energy for this new school year. We are excited. We cannot wait to welcome your children, our students back in just a few short days. And we know this is going to be one of our best school years ever. We also know, as Dr. Alexander was just saying, that you've got a lot of questions, and that's great. That's why we're here. And we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to launch right into this. So, Dr. Alexander, I'm going to turn it back over to you to lead us away.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. Appreciate it. As Dr. Spence said, we received many questions from our families to talk through tonight. And for our ease, we've categorized our questions by subject to include health, safety, cell phone policy, transportation, and general questions. The first subject on our list is health updates. And before we get to those questions, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Podati for a quick presentation. Dr. Podati?
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. So we've got just a couple of slides that I'll talk through tonight. And I just wanted to first say, as a pediatrician and as your public health director, I am so pleased to be able to join you all tonight to talk about a couple of things that might be top of mind as we think about our kids coming back to school. So the three topics I'm going to talk about tonight are going to be COVID-19, monkeypox, and influenza. So we'll go ahead and get started with a brief update on COVID. And what you're seeing here on this slide, I'm sure looks very familiar to all of you. This is what we call our epidemic or epi curve. And it shows us cases of COVID over time. And really what's important to note about this is the activity of COVID-19 virus overall. So what you can see when you look at our COVID-19 epi curve for Virginia Beach, we've actually seen a little bit of a decrease in COVID-19 activity recently, which is a great thing. Now, increasingly, what we're seeing overall with COVID-19 as a virus is we've seen it go up, we've seen it come down, but it seems to start to be looking more similar to what we would consider a seasonal respiratory virus. And so often those kinds of viruses increase in activity during the fall and winter when we're all close together in close proximity in larger groups. So it is possible, in fact, likely that we'll probably see an increase in COVID-19 activity in the fall and winter. But the good news is that we're not in the same situation that we were 1 or 2 years ago. We've got some great vaccines that are widely available and in fact available to all of our kids ages 6 months and older. So I want to just take a moment to encourage anybody who hasn't yet to get that COVID-19 booster or get up to date on your COVID-19 vaccines, because it really is the best way to protect yourself and your families from getting seriously sick due to COVID. Now, you may have heard that there'll be some additional COVID-19 vaccines available in the coming weeks, and we do expect to get some of those vaccines that are going to be adjusted or updated a little bit to reflect some of the more recently circulating strains of COVID. And as those come out, they'll be made available just like all other vaccines in a variety of places, including here at the health department. So again, we want to make sure everybody remembers that it's really important to stay informed about virus activity, and also really important to take advantage of the preventive tools we have, which are in this case, COVID-19 vaccines, which continue to be very widely available for everyone. And we can head to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about monkeypox. I'm sure many of you are hearing about monkeypox from a variety of different places. Now, monkeypox is not a new virus or a new illness. It's actually a virus that initially we detected decades ago in some parts of Africa. And when it first emerged, it looked similar to another virus that's in the same family, and that's smallpox. So what we would see would be this rash with bumps or pustules, as we call them, on the face and arms across the body. Now, thankfully, we eradicated smallpox, so we don't worry about that anymore. And we didn't see monkeypox for a while. But what's happened over the last couple of months is what we would call a new emergence or reemergence of monkeypox. And it's appearing globally, right? We've seen cases all around the US and also in Virginia, and of course, also here in Virginia Beach. So this is a virus that can cause things like that rash I mentioned, fever, and those swollen lymph nodes, so those parts of the body that help fight inflammation. Now, the way that this moves, like many other viruses, is from person to person. And while this virus isn't the same family, it's similar to chickenpox for those of you who remember having that as a kid, right? So really having that close skin to skin contact with somebody is how we're seeing this virus move from one person to another. And so when it does move that close skin to skin contact with that rash, again, the next person develops those symptoms of fever and rash, usually within a couple of weeks. Now, we consider somebody to be infectious with this virus until all of that rash or those lesions have crusted over, which again, probably sounds sort of familiar for those of you who had chickenpox when you were a kid. Now, they're again, not the same, but have some similarities in terms of what we think of clinically. So what do we do to prevent this virus? So the good news is, because it's not new, we do have tools, right? We have public health tools, as well as things like medicines and of course, vaccine for this virus. So one of the classic public health approaches that we use for this virus, we used it for COVID, we use it for all kinds of other illnesses, is really case investigation and identification of people who are at high risk or close contacts. So just like we do for all kinds of illnesses that are reported to public health, we reach out to contacts, we find out if there's anything, or sorry, we reach out to the cases to better understand if there's anything they might need to be supported on, but then also help understand who it is they may have been in close skin to skin contact with. And those are the people who public health is reaching out to because they're close contacts, they're at higher risk because they've had that close exposure, and we can offer them vaccine, which can help reduce the likelihood that they can then develop monkeypox. So again, really what we're trying to do is use a preventive tool, the availability of the vaccine we already have, and offer it to people who are at higher risk or who are close contacts of identified cases. And we can head to the next slide. So here you'll see a description about a little bit more of the things that the public health department is doing for monkeypox. So again, following up on those cases, understanding what it is they might need for support, but really identifying anybody else who's been in close contact who might need to keep an eye out for symptoms and who might need vaccine. Again, that vaccine is being made available by us at the health department, and we're working to offer it to people who are at higher risk because they've had that kind of close contact. So it's important to remember that the overall risk for our community from monkeypox is still low, but there are some people who are at higher risk, especially those people who have had close contact or potentially had close contact with a case. And those are the people who we're really reaching out to focus on to provide vaccine. But we want to make sure that everybody has access to good information and knows who to turn to if they have questions. So of course, please do feel free to reach out to your healthcare providers and public health, us, if you have questions or concerns. And we can head to the next slide. So an additional virus that we want to talk about as we think about the fall season is, of course, influenza, right? And it's one that we're all pretty familiar with. We know that it comes seasonally every year, but influenza is still a decent virus, right? It's something that can make many of us sick, and rarely some people die. Now, again, the great news with flu is we've got a vaccine. So you're going to start to see flu vaccine become available through your doctors, through your pharmacies, and through us at the health department here in the coming weeks. And it is a great time to take advantage of that flu vaccine. Ideally, you want to try and do that by around October so that your body has that immunity and can protect you through the fall and winter season. But again, it's going to be really important to take advantage of that preventive tool to help keep yourself and your families healthy throughout the school year. We can head to the next slide. So these are just a couple of resources with some additional information for you. Again, I want to emphasize that we want to make sure people are reaching out to us at the health department and to your healthcare providers when you have any questions or concerns. And I'll conclude by emphasizing that there continue to be a couple of very basic public health practices that are really effective at preventing all of the viruses and other kinds of illnesses that we think of. And that's going to be practicing frequent hand washing and staying home when you're sick, no matter what it is that you're sick with. So with that, I think I'll conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Brodati. Really appreciate the information and the update. And now we're going to move on to some of our health questions. Our first question is for Mr. Freeman. This question is, if a student is not feeling well but has no fever, are they being allowed to remain in the classroom?
Well, kind of like what Dr. Brodati just referenced, if your student doesn't feel well, if they don't feel well, they should stay home if they're sick. And we have the screening tool that our students can use and families can work with their students on in order to be able to check their symptoms prior to coming to school. And if they don't feel well while they're at school, they should go to the clinic and get checked out by the nurse, and then the nurse can make that determination of what needs to be the next step based on their symptoms.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Just one more question for you in regards to health updates. Can you give us an update about COVID and the mask policy? And are there are they mandatory at the school or on the bus?
Yeah, so Dr. Brodati just covered the COVID and where we are with COVID, so I'll focus on the mask part of that question. So much like last year, masks are optional. They are, however, recommended when community level is medium or high. Right now, community level for COVID is in the low category. If it happened to rise into the medium or high category, we intend to communicate that and give everybody a heads up through our through a standard family communication type letter. Other places where masks are recommended are days 6 through 10 post positive test and after an exposure for 10 days. There is one case where students will be required to wear a mask, and if they're in school and they go see the nurse and they're ill at school and they have respiratory or COVID-like symptoms, they'll be required to wear a mask until they're either picked up or they go home.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I'm going to shift direction and move to security. Mr. DeMartini, you are up. There's one question for you, Mr. DeMartini. With regards to safety and security of students, is there a way to have security measures in place at schools? I guess another way is like, what are the security measures that are in place?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alexander. Yes, we have several security measures in place. First, we have at the secondary level, our school resource officer program. We have a police officer assigned to all of our secondary schools. We value our partnership with the police department, and we are dependent upon those officers to help us create a safe environment, and we welcome them into our schools every year. Second, we have a robust security staff. So our security assistants at the secondary level get trained according to DCJS mandates. The DCJS is the Department of Criminal Justice Services. In addition to DCJS training, we have in-house training that they're provided, as well as recently crisis intervention. Each and every secondary school has multiple security assistants assigned. Third, all of our staff and admin have the ability to put a building in an internal or external lockdown at a moment's notice. And we are able to communicate that throughout the building multiple ways. And then lastly, we continue to train our leadership on emergency and crisis management. So there are several, in addition to other measures, we have a robust security plan.
Thank you, Mr. DiMartini. And again, thank you for helping to keep our schools safe. We're going to transition to cell phones as another category. And Mr. Delaney, many of these questions are going to be for you. The first question is there a cell phone policy prohibiting teachers and their assistants from cell phone use during instructional time?
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I think prior to answering that question, I just want to make sure I reiterate for the folks on the call, in the event there's any students on the call, as well as the purpose of this cell phone policy and cell phone regulation. Really, our desire is to maximize student engagement in the classroom. Like everybody on the call understands the competition we have for attention with cell phones. In fairness to students, not only with students, but all adults are, are people we care for. Often we're trying to get them to put their cell phone away so we can engage in conversation. So the intent of this is to ensure that they're putting away in a backpack or a bag, and that it's allowing us to really fully engage in a meaningful educational experience that involves student-to-student interaction, teacher-to-student interaction. In terms of your question, I would ask folks to take a moment to read policy 3-65 and the regulation 3-65.1, which clearly outlines the regulations. In terms of teachers and teachers' assistants, we expect our teachers to model appropriate cell phone behavior and control by not using their devices during instructional time. However, they're the adults in charge of young people in the room, and there may be times where they need to access that cell phone for a variety of reasons, as Mr. DiMartini talked about, possibly from an emergency standpoint. The clear goal we have is that teachers is just showing just modeling that appropriate cell phone behavior.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for you as well. Will the students be able to carry their phones during the day, especially in the event of an emergency at the school?
So when we look at our regulations around cell phones, it's very much, there's pieces of it that are dictated by the level of the student. So for example, when you look at our middle schools, and it may get covered later on, there's an expectation that students have their backpacks in their locker during the day. It's a much more controlled environment. So they would not have that level of access, say a high school student. If you look at our high schools, we have movement throughout the day, students coming in after first period, so forth and so on. It's a much more fluid environment. So students may have that more often on their person in terms of their backpack or their bag or their purse. The regulation talks about should not have it on their clothing, and I want to reiterate the reason for that is, as we all know, we get notifications on our cell phones that sometimes will buzz in areas that we can feel, and it causes us to check that notification and distract us from the learning environment. Most importantly in the question, I think, is the emergency piece. This is the anxiety that our families have, is if there's a significant emergency, I want to be able to get in touch with my child immediately to find out if they're okay. And we understand that. Mr. DiMartini outlined several things that are done from the Office of Security and Emergency Management that help our schools respond in those crisis situations. And quite frankly, the cell phone in an emergency situation can be a detriment to our response. We have very effective communications processes in place. If an emergency occurs, that we get out to our community and our news organizations to ensure that our community is informed. So I would just share with our folks on the call that there'll be intense communication that goes out around any type of significant emergency event. Certainly not downplaying the anxiety of wondering how your child is doing.
Thank you. stay with me because one more question for you. And this deals with the cell phone use and required accommodations. Can you speak a little bit about, accommodations, particularly maybe with 504 IEPs and how cell phones may play a role in that?
Yeah, so anytime there's conversations around IEP or 504 needs, it's imperative that they schedule a meeting with their IEP team or their school counselor around a 504 to review those accommodations and ensure they're appropriate. I know many times parents are concerned that if they were having a cell phone out as part of an accommodation, would that draw attention to them as having an IEP or a 504? Where that may occur, for example, is a student on a 504 that has a health plan and uses that device to check or monitor some levels that would be in their health plan with their nurse. The short answer, Dr. Alexander, is that they would want to meet with their IEP team, their case manager, go through that IEP and look at if those accommodations are still necessary or if there's another means that can satisfy that accommodation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delaney. Appreciate that. All right, that concludes the questions for cell phones, and we're going to move on to transportation. Mr. Lash, you are up here. Can you describe how schools and our transportation department work together to provide safe transportation for their children?
Sure. Our schools are the ones that collect the data on student information. They put the information in the system, our student information system, and pertinent information relating to transportation is then fed over to our staff, where we use it to create safe and efficient bus runs.
Thank you. And the next one is, excuse me, is there an app to see where the bus is on its route? Can your child do a mix between bus and drop off? And the last part of the question is, what do you do if your child will be missing school?
Sure. We utilize an app called the Edulog Parent Portal. It's a GPS app, and it allows you to track your student's bus. In addition to allowing you to track in real time, it will provide you with information such as the current location of the bus and when it is expected to approach the bus stop. It'll send you a message to let you know that. Of course, if you haven't signed up for that, you can go to our VB Schools website. In the parent drop-down menu, choose transportation and follow the links, and you can sign up for that. As far as the second question, you can, under certain circumstances, I guess, go or change drop-off locations. However, for instance, if you're dual custody, we'll provide that service in zone as well as daycares, but it does have to be in zone. There's more information on our website about that. And if your child will be missing school, no worries if they're on a regular bus. However, if they go to one of our specialty programs, I would advise parents to contact the schools, who will in turn contact transportation and let us know, hey, the bus doesn't need to go out of its way to pick a child up.
Thank you. Great information, Mr. Lash. How does a family get ParentVUE email to activate their account?
Okay, if you haven't signed up yet for ParentVUE, if you go to the vbschools.com website, under parent drop-down menu, the parent portal menu is there, and you can register for that particular service.
Great. And where do we find, or where do parents find the Academy bus stops and times?
Okay, those bus stop times and locations of stops will be provided to both parents and students by the actual schools.
Okay. And how will parents receive bus numbers, or when will parents receive bus numbers?
Okay, if your child is already registered for school, you can go in ParentVUE. The information is already in there. If you don't see that information, if it's blank, we urge you to contact the student's home school to register for transportation. Also, school bus information for specialty programs such as our ATC, VOTEC, et cetera, will be provided directly by the schools, the program coordinators at those schools.
Great. And the last question I have for you, Mr. Lash, is, and I think you spoke about this a little bit earlier, but will there be a way to be notified, or parents can be notified when a bus will be late or substituted?
Yes, we'll do everything we can possible. Like I said earlier, the Edulog Parent Portal app. You can use it on your phone to access the bus information, to receive push notifications if a bus is running late, et cetera. So we encourage people to make use of the app.
Thank you, Mr. Last. That app sounds awesome. So thank you for you and your team for implementing and then helping our families know where their children are. It's very important. The next set of questions are our last set, which is general questions. So this is really going to be open to any of the panelists to be able to answer. The first question I have is centers around middle school. Will middle school students have access to lockers this school year? Dr. Smith, I'm assuming that is going to be your question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Alexander. Pleased to say that students will have an assigned locker. They will get that assigned locker the first day of school. Many of our rising sixth grade students through orientation have already been assigned a locker and know how to work the lock so that they can get in and out of their locker successfully. I know there's some anxiety on the first day. We have a lot of staff who help them. We also ask that students store their book bags in their lockers throughout the school day. Schools do have assigned locker visits times. Typically, it's first thing in the morning, all students access their lockers for the morning classes. Then early afternoon, they're allowed to go back to their lockers. And then, of course, at the very end of the day. And for those who have a student who's in middle school for the first time, who has never worked a lock, we have lots of support and teachers who will be there to help them.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Smith. I know those lockers, as a former middle school teacher, those lockers that first day is a big deal. So thank you for that information. The next question is for you as well. Will students be required to dress for PE?
Yes, we do ask for safety reasons that students dress out for PE. They'll have access to a locker in the PE locker room. It's typically shorts, t-shirt, and a comfortable pair of running shoes. Teachers will give them that information on the first day. Schools do offer for sale uniforms, PE uniforms. I know a lot of kids like it because it has the school name on it. And it sort of their own little thing for PE. However, parents aren't required to pay for it if they don't want to. They can just make sure that their student has a pair of shorts, t-shirt, and running shoes so that they can participate in PE.
Thank you for that information, Dr. Smith. The next question is a food service question. Ms. Harrison, I'm going to assume this question is going to go to you. Can I transfer outstanding balances from the school cafe accounts of my two children who have graduated over to my other high school child? If so, how do I go about doing such?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Alexander. So the question implies that the parent has a school cafe account already, and we do have a link to a form that we use to transfer the balances over to a sibling. If you go to School Cafe to the notifications icon to the right, there is a notification there that has the link that is called Cafeteria Meal Refund Request. Also, parents can go to vbschools.com under the Parents tab and click on Menus and Meal Payments, and the form link is there as well.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. The next question is, will one lunch be brought back to the high schools? And Mr. Delaney, I think this might be your question.
Sure. As many on the call may know, One Lunch is very popular for our students. They really enjoy the opportunities it gives them to attend tutoring, get involved in clubs and also other extracurricular activities. So there is a desire to return to One Lunch, but we also have to have really good plans and processes in place. And Ms. Harrison's team with food services needs to be able to respond accordingly to that change. We need to make sure our custodial teams are there and that we have firm safety, security plans in place for a shift such as that. So certainly an area of heavy interest. As a former principal of a One Lunch school, it was extremely beneficial for our kids, and we're going to try to transition there in the manner that makes the most sense.
Thank you, sir. And this might be your question as well. A parent wrote, we have received the class schedule. However, it does not list any times for the classes, such lunch, etc.
So a couple things I would say to that. One is it's always a good idea to reach out to your school counselor, and inquire with regard to any scheduling concerns at the school building. Secondly, on the first day of school, at middle school and high school, there's going to be staff stationed throughout the building, assisting students with where they need to go and where they need to arrive. In most of those cases, if by chance there is not a room number or a block of time, they will have the most up-to-date schedule for your student. And when they arrive, they're going to get to the right location. If not, they'll get an opportunity to meet with their school counselor and get it fixed. Schools are very well equipped to ensure they have a smooth opening around class schedules. We know how important it is for kids to feel like they're being welcomed in on their first day and getting the appropriate class expectations and so forth. Excuse me, Dr. Alexander. So again, to recap, contact the school counselor, and also recognize there'll be several folks, adults in the building, to assist their child on the first day of school.
And you're speaking a little bit about schedules. Can you elaborate a little bit more about class schedules and time allowed for students?
Yeah, so I'll take it more from a high school end, because that's the one where people may have the most questions in terms of the changes that have existed on high schools as we move this year to what we're calling a flexible hybrid schedule, which combines 4x4 and the traditional AB classes, and some students may have a combination of both. So again, it's very important that they're working with their school counselor. Blocks of time will be about 85 minutes per class that they are expected to meet and engage in. And we just ask for patience as teachers are working through this change, schools are, and certainly we understand the challenges that a student may come home with. I'll say this probably till I'm red in the face. That school counselor is just a great resource for teachers to reach out to ensure their students feel comfortable with the class schedule they have and have an understanding of what they're taking for the year.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Ms. Harrison, I'm coming back to you with another food service question. Will children be issued the PEBT cards this year?
Sure. For those on the phone call that don't know what that stands for, those are pandemic electronic benefit transfer cards that have aided our households that qualified during COVID times to receive extra funding because they missed the meals that were provided at schools. And so to answer that question is this summer, the Virginia Department of Social Services did issue a PEBT payment that just happened on August 25th. And if there is any other information that that department has, they will relate it to us. If you go to vbschools.com and you go to Parents tab and click on Menus and Meal Payments, we actually have a tab for PEBT information that links directly to the Virginia Department of Social Services website, and any new information that they post gets updated there as well. At this point in time, we do not have any information that further PEBT benefits will be issued in the fall. But for those expecting them for the summer, they should have received them. If they did not, please call the Virginia Department of Social Services, and the information is on our PEBT tab on our meals and menu and meal payments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Thank you for that great information on that. The next question, Dr. Smith or Mr. Delaney, I'm sure you could answer. What is the main mode of communication with teachers?
Typically, our teachers are very adept at email communication. They'll go over that best practice for communication during their meet and greets and in their class expectations. But we also work with teachers quite often on the personal touch of a phone call if emails aren't kind of being effectively communicated. And we just always think it's best practice to engage in a verbal conversation if email communication is not working as well as it should be. So we then also have opportunities for parent-teacher conferences and opportunities where they can come in and meet with their teachers and really work as a partnership. I think in all of those instances, it's important that we come from the position of a partnership, that we're here to really support our kids' needs, and we expect our parents to advocate, and our teachers quite often are their number one cheerleaders as well.
Thank you. And is there a dress code?
Yes, there is a dress code. Always an interesting point of conversation, especially for our high school students. I would recommend that parents check policy 5-41, that they read the code of conduct very closely, I'm extremely confident that our secondary principals send information home specifically on the dress code. And really the purpose of the dress code is just create a safe and respectful environment that just really contributes to achieving your post-academic success. We talk often on the high school level about the desire for students when they graduate to be future ready to enroll, enlist, and employed. And quite frankly, we believe appropriate dress is one manner in which shows that level of commitment to that.
Awesome, thank you. The next question, Mr. Delaney, is when is the school calendar of days off available? And then a parent said we found out last year that there were dates that might have been changed.
Yeah, when I hear that question, one thing I think about is last year we did have some dates changed. If people recall, in December, January, we really were having some scenarios where we wanted to support our teachers and provide some mental health days and planning days for them. If we all remember kind of what they were going through. The current calendar is posted on our VB Schools website, 22-23 calendar. And also you will see the calendar for the next year in there, as well as we went ahead and went 2 years ahead with the calendar with the school board last year. So they just need to go to the VB Schools site. I believe it's in the About Us category at the top of the page, and they can see calendar and click on there and access our school calendars.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. One more for you, sir. This is a scheduling question again. It says, with the 4x4 scheduling, there will be a long period of time for students taking a foreign language in the first half of the year until they are able to pick back up in the following school year. Aside from home study, how is the school ensuring these students' grades don't suffer because of the long lapse?
So when I hear that question, the part that really stands out to me is that their grades will not suffer. And that's an area where we really focus on when a student rejoins our class at the start of the next year. Our teachers are well adept at providing really strong formative assessments to get a gauge of where our kids are at the moment they walk in our skill building. And then they adjust some of that accordingly to what the students' needs are with regard to either areas where they need support and re-engage into what was learned last year, or in many cases to accelerate. We really look to differentiate that support. In some cases this year, one of the goals we have of this schedule on the 4x4 is for a student to double up those world language classes at times during the year. So a student could take world language first term and another world language second term. We do have examples of that this year. As we work through this schedule in the upcoming years, we hope to increase those opportunities. So that is not the challenge. But as I said, we're very adept at recognizing where students are as they enter our classrooms and providing the supports necessary to not have their grades suffer.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Go get some water. You are all done. Next and final question is for Dr. Spence. Dr. Spence, parents have reached out, and how do we plan on keeping our teachers?
Yeah, got a similar question from our elementary webinar, and it is a great question. I know folks are probably reading a lot about what's going on with staffing in public education. And so first thing I want to do is I want to give you some great assurance. We've been having staffing conversations, all through the staffing season, which really starts for us in the early spring, and we get updates every week. And I have a really high degree of confidence that we are very close to being fully staffed in our high schools and our middle schools. Our HR team, working with our school leadership folks and with our school principals, have really done a great job of making sure that we've got good, outstanding quality teachers, the kind of teacher we all expect in Virginia Beach in our classrooms. Doesn't mean we don't have a few vacancies. We do. Our HR team is continuing to work on those vacancies. But our goal is to get as close to fully staffed as we can to start the year. That said, in addition to filling vacancies, we want to make sure we keep our great teachers in Virginia Beach. And all of you, if you've been in Virginia Beach for more than 1 year, you've got stories of great teachers that your children love. And you know that we want to try to keep all of those teachers here with us. So there's a number of different things that we've been doing. You just heard Mr. Delaney talk about trying to be responsive during the pandemic to some of the mental health needs of our teachers and helping them kind of adapt to and overcome some of the challenges that were associated with teaching in a virtual environment. And then when kids were coming back from school. But in addition to that, obviously, we've been trying to pay attention to compensation. We were able to give a good 6% raise to our staff this year. Compensation comes up a lot of times as an issue. It's not the only issue, but it's one our school board is really focused on, and they certainly understand we need to keep as a community working to make sure that our teachers are well compensated for the work that they do. But I'll tell you, the other thing that we hear a lot from our teachers is that, you know, what they really want and what they really need here in Virginia Beach is they want to work in a positive culture. They want to work in a workplace where they feel valued and where they feel respected, where they feel like the leadership of the division, the leadership of their schools really kind of knows who they are and values them as professionals and really kind of sees them and the challenges they're having in the moment, but also celebrates their many successes. And again, really just kind of lifts them up and values who they are. And I would say this for parents who are asking, what are we going to do to keep our teachers around? This is not a Dr. Spence can solve it problem. This is a community challenge that we have. We working together have to make sure that our teachers know how much we appreciate and we value and we admire them. And I think we've somehow gotten away from that a little bit in public education. And we really need to come back to remembering how important teachers are in our community. So I'd say if you're on this call, remember this as we go into the school year. You know, teachers often only hear from the parents who have concerns. And our teachers need to hear from you if you just think they're doing a great job. I can tell you, having been a high school principal, having been a classroom teacher, that the best moments of my career, the things that kept me going and the things that still keep me going are when I hear those nice words about the work we're doing, the impact we're having, the life we've changed, the kid who just really appreciates coming into my classroom. You know, if you just reach out and tell the teachers that, that's going to do so much to help Virginia Beach keep its great teachers, keep them here in our schools and in our city. And, you know, I think as a community, we just need to remember it's our job to help our teachers know what an incredible asset they are and how important they are to all of us. And it takes all of us to do that. So let's start this school year off remembering how great they are. And let's continue to remind them of that throughout the year. And we'll continue on our side doing the work of making sure they know that and that they know we want them to stay with us, because teaching is a great career and it's especially great here in Virginia Beach.
Well said, and thank you, Dr. Spence. And that will be our final words for tonight. And obviously that concludes our session. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and can be found on VB Schools website. Thank you to all our panelists for your time and your expertise. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in tonight. We look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, together, we can make this a fantastic school year. Be safe and have a great night.
And thank you all for coming. We appreciate you so much.